Good morning. Myself Anjali Rathod, Season 3 Presentation Day 3, in which I am going to deal with my presentation topic on Franz Fanon's theory of violence. This is my personal information, table of contents, introduction of the author. Fanon's main elements, thoughts are what is violence, importance of violence, theory of violence, and conclusion. Introduction. Franz Fanon, in a full name, Franz Omer Fanon. He was Western Indian psychoanalyst and social philosopher known for his theory that some neurios are socially generated and for his writing on behalf of the national liberation of colonial peoples. Uh, Franz Fanon perceived colonialism as a form of domination whose necessary goal for success was the rewarding for the of the world or indigenous peoples. He saw violence as the defining characteristics of colonialism. But if violence was a tool of social control, it may also, argued Fanon, be a cathartic reaction to the oppression of colonialism and necessary tool of political engagement. One of the Fanon's most notable works is Black Skin, White Marks, in which he explores the psychological effect of racism and colonialism on black individuals. Uh, Franz Fanon has been made the symbol of conflict. We must see that he also stood for reconciliation. Fanon also who did not trust fervor must be confronted if we are to understand the Fanon who later preached violence. He always remembered his West Indian origins is while trying to identify himself first as a Frenchman and later as an anti-French Algerian rebel. Franz Fanon was born on July 1925 in Fort-de-France, the capital of the French colony of Martinique. After receiving his early education, he joined the French army in 1943 in response to the call of General de Gaulle to save France. After the Second World War, he went to France in 1947 to receive higher education in medicine and stayed there for 5 years up to 1952. It was during this period that he wrote his first book, Black Skin, White Marks, which was published in 1952. Uh, he came to Algeria in 1953 to work as a psychiatrist and dedicated himself to the cause of Algerian independence. Uh, he was expelled from Algeria in 1957 from 1957 till his death in 1961. He worked as a professional revolutionary. It was during this last phase of his life that he published most of his works. Fanon's writings have had a profound impact on scholars, activists, and movements advocating for racial and social justice around the world. Fanon's main elements, thoughts are colonial dehumanization, psychological impact of colonization, and violation and decolonization. Uh, I- uh, in these, his most main elements, thoughts are his stress on black consciousness and his revolt against resist colonialism, his belief in and concern for creating a new humanism and the incorporation of existentialist and Marxist influences. And the discovery of peasantry and lumpen proletariat is a new agents of revolution in the third world, and finally his glorification of violence. What is violence? Ac- uh, According to Jaha, Fanon defines the term violence in clear-cut terms. He has used it in more sense more senses than one. For example, he has used it in the sense of physical injury. This is one sense in which he refers to colonial regime as being created and maintained by violence. Fanon writes, their first encounter was worked by violence and their existence, that is to say, the exploitation of the native by the settler was carried on by dint of a great array of bayonets and cannon. Franz Fanon, in her seminal work, The Wretched of the Earth, explores the concept of violence in the context of anti colonial struggles. He argues that violence is not only a physical act, but also psychological and existential phenomenon within the within the colonized individual and society. And Fanon contends that colonialism is inherently violent as it dehumanizes and oppresses the colonized people. Fanon's meaning of violence is not quite clear. It is fraught with ambiguities. His violence means anything except non-violence. His concept of violence encompasses almost the entire range of political pressure, including physical or psychological injury, aggression, military coercion, power, or force. Uh, he uh, he writes, the hecatombs are an indications that between oppressor and oppressed, everything can be solved by forces. Again, while explaining the real nature of violence, Fanon says, we have seen that it is the institution of the colonized masses that their liberations must and can only be achieved by force. Uh, uh, According to Franz Fanon, violence is a tool that can serve as a cathartic and transformative force. He sees violence as a way for the colonized people to resist the dehumanization imposed upon them by the colonizers. Importance of violence. Uh, Fanon attaches a great importance to violence on several grounds. First, Fanon maintains that it is only through violence that man creates himself. For revolutionary violence free man's consciousness and creates a new man. Fanon's idea is quite different from that of Hegel and Marx. While according to Hegelman is the product of his thought, Marx maintains that man is the product of labor, but Fanon says that man produces himself through violence. According to Sartre, Fanon makes it clear that irrepressible violence is neither sound and fury. There is also another sense in which man creates himself through violence. Fanon maintains that colonized man finds his freedom in and through violence. Fanon uses violence as a catharsis. He argues that violence is a cleansing force. It frees the colonized from his feeling of inferiority and humiliation. To quote Fanon, at the level of individuals, violence is a cleansing force. It frees the native from his inferiority complex and from his despair and inaction. It makes him fearless and restores his self-respect. Thus, Fanon believes in the purificatory role of violence. Fanon glorifies violence because it acts as a unifying force for the native people. He maintains that it is not enough for the colonized to gain liberation as consciousness. This solidarity can be built only by violence. It binds the people together to form a collective individual. Fanon writes, the practice of violence blinds them together as a whole. Since each individual settler's violent link Fanon maintains that violence pays not only during the colonial struggles for the independence, for independence, but also in the second phase of decolonization. The second phase of decolonization is the period of national reconstruction and building up the nation. The solidarity of the people gained during the struggle for independence helps in the liquidation of regionalism and tribalism. Uh, During the period of national reconstruction, the difference is that while during the colonial period, the people are called upon to fight against oppression. After national liberation, they are called upon to fight against poverty, illiteracy, and underdevelopment. Thus, the struggle goes on, and the people realize that life is an unending contest. Fanon extols violence because it is a key to social truth and actions. He conceives of violence as a process in which two phases can be distinguished. In the first phase, there is a spontaneous outburst of violence without organization, organized and politicized. The first phase of violence is motivated by the racial hatred, the second by the political indoctrination, and the first releases the pent of feelings, the second raises consciousness, and the one tends to do away with the psychological alienation of the colonized. The other changes the capitalist colonial structures which produce such alienation. Violence committed by the people, violence organized and educated by its leaders makes it possible for the masses to understand social truths and gives the key to them. Without the struggle, there is nothing but a fancy dance parade and the blare of the trumpets. A theory of violence. According to Franz Fanon, he gave some theory on violence, like colonial violence, psychological violence, counter violence is a liberation and a transition to a post colonial society. Uh, uh, Fanon's theory of violence is open to searching criticisms, and several serious objections may be raised against it. To begin with, though Fanon gives much importance to violence, he does not define it in clear cut terms. He uses it in a sense that embodies the connotations we associate with injury, coercion, force, power, and the like. In fact, Fanon Fanon's violence used to explain everything explains nothing. The loose usage of such a critical term weakens its analytical utility. Fanon argued that colonialism is inherently violent. Voluntary violence may degenerate into uh, political masochism. The shortcomings of any celebrations of violence are not only limited to the level of individual psychosis. They may pose problems to the social and political system. Fanon examined the psychological violence inflicted upon the colonized. He discussed colonialism leads to feelings of inferiority, self-hatred, and alienation among the colonized individuals. Fanon maintains that violence recreates man by liberating his consciousness. It is true that Fanon is not alone in his appeal to violence as a liberating force for men. Nevertheless, violence is not the only way to achieve liberation of consciousness has been admitted by Fanon himself when he writes, it is clear that other peoples have come to the same conclusion in different ways. We know for sure today that in Algeria the test of force was inevitable, but other countries, through political action and through the work of clarification undertaken by a party, have led their people to the same results. Uh, Fanon believed that violence, when strategically employed, could lead to the overthrow of colonial powers. He also stressed the importance of transitioning from a violent struggle to just an egalitarian post-colonial society. The end goal was not the perpetuation of violence, but the establishment of a society where all individuals could live in dignity and equality. Uh, Finance is also mistaken in regarding violence as a cause of colonial alienation. He does not say in what precise manner violence causes the alienation of the native. We know, for instance, that in the colonized society like Algeria, the violence of the colonizers was not the only form of violence, and that the colonized was also violent. How can we be sure that a particular alienation expressed by a particular person is not the result of natives' own violence, different from the violence of the colonial regime? Fanon's thesis that violence is a unifying force is questionable on several grounds. First, violence is the result of a psychological state of mind uh, in which is wanted by anger, hatred, divisions, and fighting. People who suffer from such psychological distortions may forge a bond of unity for a time being against a common enemy, but there is no guarantee that such unity will continue after the disappearance of the common enemy. Second, real unity is possible where there is a harmony and friendship, and this cannot be secured on the basis of violence. Third, the gang which is engaged in inflicting violence on foreigners may adopt the same device of injuring one another in dealing with its own members. Fanon's theory of violence is rooted in the understanding of violence as a response to systematic colonial oppression and a means through which the colonized can reclaim their humanity, and he saw violence as a tool for liberation. Yet he was mindful of its complexities and the need for a just and a peaceful post-colonial future. And his ideas continued to the provoke discussions about the ethics and effectiveness of resistance, especially in the face of oppressive regimes. A conclusion: to sum up, it may therefore be said that the general applicability of Fanon's theory of violence is doubtful. Fanon has somewhat limited historical experience as he proceeds mainly from the experience of Algeria. There is much evidence to suggest that violence may be necessary in African countries which are or were dominated by white settler groups, as in Algeria, Rhodesia, South Africa, and the Portuguese territories. Fanon's theory of violence is a queer mixture of romanticism and utopianism, of revolutionary integrity and reckless venture, of heroic self-sacrifice and political naivete. He attempts to foist violence upon the people from above. He forgets that such type of violence is bound to end in intrigue and conspiracy. In fact, revolution must be the achievement of something new, but the violence and the revolutionary. This is references. Thank you. If you have any query, then you can ask.
Anjali, how does Fanon's theory of violence relate to the broader question about power, oppression, and social change?
Uh, Franz Fanon's theory of violence in his work The Wretched of the Earth, he uses the all like a power, oppression, and social change. It is a deep link between the all power, oppression, and social change and power dynamics. Dehumanizes in social injustice.
Anjali, for you, my question is: what is the role of violence in the psychological and emotional liberation of the oppressed, according to Fanon's perspective?
The role of violence, according to Franz Fanon, he can serve as a cathartic cathartic relevance. Cathartic relevance in psychological and emotional liberation uh, in social justice and power of oppression in the society. Thank you.